And then if you have any questions during this, please just type them in the thing over here, and then I'll throw them up, and then Sean will
I
answer
won't
them.
see them though because I don't have a second monitor. So
Oh,
just interrupt me if you're throwing them up. Start talking, Mike.
wait. So can you not? You can't see that.
No, I can only see. I had to go. No, I'm full screen now in my presentation.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just interrupt you then.
All right, I'm totally cool being interrupted.
Okay, I'll interrupt you. Oh. And Barley and me is Douglas, just so you know, because it says
Hello,
Barley.
Douglas.
Douglas. And then there's another guy here, Doug Rickardson, who is a friend of mine too. Just so you know, all the people that are in the audience. So, all right, let's get started.
Awesome.
Sean, thank you so much for being here. First of all, go
No,
for it.
thanks for having me as always. So this is a presentation that I've given a few times. I've customized it here, basically sharing what I've learned in how to grow your podcast. So part of that experience is from Fable and Folly. We are a network of fiction shows. Where I'm representing all these shows for sponsorship and growth. And so, very focused on what works to grow, not just our shows we produce, but the shows we represent. And then my day job, quote unquote, is I have a contract with Pacific Content where I'm doing the same thing. I'm basically growing their top of the line branded shows. So my job is to go out and, using primarily paid media, grow the listenerships in those shows. So I'm going to be talking primarily today about paid, but I'm also going to talk about the channels we have for earned and owned. But if you have questions about earned channels like social media, throw them in. Happy to answer them. But once we start getting into like a paid opportunity, like for whether it's on social media or to buy a promo spot, what I'm going to talk about is even more important. But you can apply what I'm talking about to earned as well. So, talking one of my only slides on earned and owned. So basically, I think a lot of us know this stuff. Being active where our community is in social. The key is not just to pick the social platform we like, but the social platform where our audience is. For example, a lot of the shows that I represent primarily have a really strong audience reach in Tumblr, the social media area that I'm the least familiar with. So I think it's important that each show figure out where that fan base is, whether it's LinkedIn, and be as active as you can there. Don't try and be active everywhere. It just doesn't work generally with the limited time we all have. One of the key things, though, is to stop moving from just a posting schedule to actually getting engagement to happen. I can't tell you on the shows that I directly produce, when I actually enter into a really cool conversation on Twitter, it's with one of my shows, I will almost always see a Patreon result out of that conversation. So, or more times than not. So this idea of actually engaging with fans is really important than just posting links that just disappear. Email newsletter. I'm sort of amazed to this day how few shows have an email newsletter. I think it's really important. Have a whole different presentation on that. Consider a referral program. I'm going to show you an example of that. It's something we're playing with now and we're having some interesting results from. Basically, it's a way to reward listeners for sharing your show or sharing an episode of your show with their friends or on their social networks. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is this last one, targeting people who already listen to podcasts. Trying to grow your podcast is about behavior change. It's about getting someone to start listening to something new. And most of us already have enough in our day. We're busy enough as it is. So when we're trying to change behavior, we want to find those people that it's going to be the easiest to shift their behavior. Getting someone who doesn't even know what a podcast is to start listening to your show is a lot of work and painful and not as likely to stick. Finding someone who listens to shows like your show, so similar in format or similar in content or topic, it's much easier. And so we're going to talk a lot about today about how to do that, but more importantly, how to measure it. So referral programs, this is sort of new in the podcast space. There aren't a lot of providers really offering programs like this. Glow.fm has recently been beta testing a really cool program that I'm showing it here on the screen. This is for my show Civilized, where you can actually create a referral program that you then reward your fans for like basically signing up to share your show and get a referral link that they can share. But what's really neat about this program is they're putting in a lot of neat stuff where they're reminding the people that join, like when you release an episode, they send out an email to be like, hey, you can share this episode right now and you're so close to the next tier of winning a reward. So it's a pretty inexpensive program from Go.fm right now in beta. Okay, I just want to make sure everybody understands some basic terminology. So when we start talking about the sweet spot when we have a podcast, it's just targeting other people that already listen and subscribe to podcasts. We really have 3 tools that we look at. So these are things that happen inside a podcast. So this is where you can do a trade, or you can pay a producer of another podcast that you think is a great fit to promote your show. The first one, and these all work, but the least effective is a promo spot. So, and I'm going to talk about the numbers later. So this is basically what we call a host-read spot generally. You generally do not want to give an ad for your show. You don't want to hand off an ad to another producer. Does not work as well. You want that other show, the producer or the host or the creator of that other show, to record an endorsement of your show in their own voice. They know their audience knows their voice, they have the relationship. And so that's called a promo spot, and a host-read promo spot is what you want. They're basically going to read a minute long or sometimes longer endorsement of your show, and that's going to appear in an episode or multiple episodes. An episode drop is sort of the next tier and can be insanely effective. And not a lot of people know about it, and not everyone's always open to doing it. But it's often where I start. This is where you agree to drop an episode of another show in your feed, or if you're promoting them, and vice versa, they would drop an episode of your show in their feed. So this is going to go out in their podcast. Everyone who subscribes to their show is going to see a new episode. It usually has a title that has the name of the show that's being there, so people know what it is. It also includes a preamble off the top. So if you were doing an episode drop, so if I was doing an episode drop for one of Mike's shows, I would pick the episode that I really think would meet my audience. I don't know which one that would be, Mike. And then I would include a little read at the top explaining to my listeners what this is in their feed and why I want to share it with them. So it includes an endorsement off the top. Then the last is a collaborative episode, which is the most effective way to transfer listeners between shows. But this is the hardest to create and produce and deliver. It takes a lot of time. This is where you're going to work with another host or show or creator to create something special. An episode that maybe brings your hosts together. A new episode that combines the approaches of 2 different shows. In the sort of fiction space where one of the places I live, this would be we find a way to unite 2 story worlds and do a little produce a spin-off that would be an episode where the 2 worlds meet. In the talk podcast world or interview podcast world, this might be each of the hosts coming on and interviewing each other, or doing an investigative show where each host is involved in working on the piece. And then both shows would drop that episode in their feed, and it would include an endorsement off the top and sometimes in the middle and in the post of how you can hear more about this other show that the people may not know about. Now, the key with all of these is that you can cap them. And cap them is just slang for, in ad world, saying you wanna put them there forever, or you want to say that I'm going to do this trade. Let's do a trade, and let's each run it for 4 weeks. So you can do an episode swap where you each drop an episode of each other's shows, a show you love, and vice versa. And after 4 weeks, you both delete it from your feed. Or you can cap it on a certain number of impressions. Like if you're doing this with a bigger show, they may run it for 4 weeks, and you might say, I'm going to run it till I hit 50,000 impressions for you, or whatever. How are we doing, Mike? Any questions so far?
Not yet. No.
Okay.
It's great though.
I talk really fast, so don't be afraid to interrupt me. And I can't see anyone, so it's hard. Okay. So the golden rule: do not invest your time or your money into a podcast growth strategy if you can't measure the downloads generated. And I hate to say it, but measuring the downloads generated does not mean looking for the bump in your downloads. That is not an effective strategy because you don't know. You could have gotten an article on the day you do a promo swap, and that article is responsible, not the promo swap. So you really want to understand. And if you're doing a promo swap, like nobody's spending any money, it's not as big of a deal. But you really want to know, if you really want to grow your show, which promo swaps you've negotiated actually worked. Like where do you reinvest your time? How do you know what swaps to do in the future or where to start spending money? So if you're not measuring downloads you generated, I tell most people lay off and just wait until you can figure that out. And I'm going to show you some ways to do that today. A couple tools. Okay, so the rest of the talk, or most of the talk today now, is going to be about paid channels. But everything I'm going to talk about also applies to doing a trade. I negotiate a lot of trades for all the shows I represent. It is a great deal. If I can get someone to drop a show that is larger than me that I adore to agree to an episode swap, I'm there. Like I'll run it for as long as I need to in my show to get a drop on their show and vice versa. But sometimes I need to sweeten the pot with money, or sometimes I'm like, I really want to be on that show. I'll pay to do that. So what we need to be able to do is understand cost per download. And we need to understand, to get there, how to measure our spend and the downloads we're generating. And so I'm also going to share with you the 3 paid strategies with the best and lowest CPD. So cost per download, we want it as low as possible. We don't want to give someone $500 and get 1 download. That's going to be $500 for a download. Not great. And I'm going to talk about what it takes to get 1,000 listeners. That's because I'm in a world where I'm trying to monetize all my shows, and I am monetizing all my shows. So we sell ads on what's called a CPM basis, a cost per 1,000. So it's really important as a podcaster to think in thousands. How many, do you have 10,000 downloads a week? Great, you can monetize that. But what does it cost to get 1,000 is a key thing to think about compared to what we're going to monetize it for. Okay, so what is CPD? I sort of explained it. It's cost per download. A paid acquisition is anytime you pay money. It could be a Facebook post. Don't do Facebook. It could be a paid promo on another podcast. Cost per download and cost per listen are sort of interchangeable, CPL or CPD. I don't use CPL as much anymore because some people think it means cost per listener, which is more like cost per subscriber. Also, in the podcast world, because streaming hasn't really fully deployed to everyone, we don't really know if we get a listen, right? We all have to, I feel like CPD is just more honest, right? We put all this work into our podcast and we see 10,000 people download it. Well, that's not really true. That's how we think. Really, we get 10,000 downloads, right? That doesn't mean everyone listened to it. It could have been an app. Some of them could be bots, etc. So CPD is what I tend to use, but it's interchangeable. I already talked about this. Okay, so here's a real life example of why measurement is important. So this is an actual true case study. So I was excited when we were launching our new show, Civilized. I didn't have measurement in place. This was a while ago, a couple of years ago. And so I spent $20 on a Facebook ad to promote the podcast. And Facebook loves to give you all these stats that are utterly bogus. And the key one is clicks, right? Because I was paying per click. So Facebook's like, you only paid 35 cents a click. And I thought, well, that's not bad, 35 cents a click, not bad. Maybe I'll spend another $20. Except Facebook won't tell me how many downloads my podcast got. So I need a third-party tool that will let me measure this. Now, in that case, I actually did have that tool, so I lied. But what I got out of listeners in that case was 1. So that means I paid $20, not $25. I paid $20 a download. So 1,000 downloads is going to cost me $20,000. So if I'm paying $20,000 to get, not that I can, to get 1,000 downloads, my next question is, what does it cost me to get 1,000 subscribers? So we can assume that if we can assume that the number of people who will click to download or listen to a podcast is going to be a lot higher than the number of people that will click that subscribe button. So my cost per subscriber is probably insane in this scenario. So anytime we're working, we want to measure downloads if we can, not clicks. And most ads we buy tell us about clicks, not listens or downloads. So I'm going to share some tools with you that you can actually measure downloads that are going to convert from the campaigns you're spending on. They're a little confusing. So I'm going to go into Chartable in the most detail, but there's another one called Pod Sites. They're very similar. Chartable offers a free level where you can do some things. Pod Sites does not, to the best of my knowledge. All right, I'm going to take you through an example. Let's see if I can explain this, Mike, and please jump in if this doesn't make sense. Okay, so I'm going to create a Facebook ad. It's for my show Civilized. And I'm going to link this ad to a Chartable smart link. So I'm going to go into Chartable and create what they just call it a smart link. It's basically a link that when someone clicks on it is going to take the user to the podcast app of their choice. So in this case, it's going to take them to Apple Podcasts. They're on an Apple device. But it'll also offer them, I can have it send them to Spotify. I can have them choose where they want to go. But what Chartable is going to do with that link is it's going to get the IP of that person, the person that clicked on my ad, and it's going to get the device type of what are they on. So it's going to know, someone from this IP, it's anonymous, but there's no personally identifiable information. Someone from this IP that's on this kind of phone, it's all they get, clicked on this link. Why is that important? Because I've installed the Chartable prefix on Civilized, my podcast. Okay. So a prefix just means that it goes in the front of your normal RSS feed. So your hosts, almost all hosts support it now. So basically my normal feed would not include the bolded stuff. It would just be https://rss.art19.com, blah, blah, blah. But this Chartable track and this code, 38DGD, just goes in the front of every episode, and your host will do this automatically. So anyone who clicks to play my episode is going to pass through Chartable first. Chartable is going to it's going to get the same two pieces of information off of anybody who clicks play in their podcast app. It's going to get their IP address and their device type. And then it's going to compare using a bit of math and a bit of magic, because it's a bit messy. It's going to try and compare if anybody else within a window of time, about 24 hours or so, or I think there's larger windows too, did someone come through on a smart link with that same device type and that same IP? So it's trying to say, hey, someone just listened. Did this person click on an ad earlier? And if it does, then Chartable is going to connect the dots. So this is actually how I knew on that Facebook promo that I only got one download, because I was able to track it with Chartable. And Chartable told me at the end, you spent $20, you got this many clicks, but only one download of your podcast that matched someone that saw the ad and clicked on it. So here's an example of the Smart Links reporting. There's a lot here. But in essence, what we're looking at is you can create a bunch of codes, give them whatever names you want to track, and then you can see how many people clicked, how many people downloaded. Okay, and I've circled an example where I got 0 downloads and I got 123 downloads. Okay. So by putting a smart link on a social promotion, so this could be a paid or not. Like I'll do smart links on my tweets. I'll put them on a contest. I'll put them on anything I do paid to see how many actually people go through and download the podcast. Any questions, Mike?
No, and that's really fascinating, actually. I wondered how you use Chartable for that. And there are other ways besides
Yes.
social, like what are you, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, this is good. So if I can put a link on something, I can use a smart link, right? And so I can then try and track, do I get any downloads out of that, whatever it was. So anytime I do, like if I do a new link on a new social media platform, I'll make it a smart link to say, hey, are there people on here that will become listeners? Or if I pay for something. But we don't always have a link to click on. A good example is I talked about the 3 things I focus on, which is a promo spot or a swap, an episode drop, or collaborative episode. You can put a link in the show notes, but let's be honest, nobody clicks on those links in show notes. So how do we know if those are working? That's just somebody hearing a spot. Like I tune into Mike's podcast and I hear a spot for Civilized. How do I tell that this user person went and tried out Civilized versus just heard the ad? So there's a solution. Again, I'm going to go over Chartable's solution, but there's also a PodSite solution here. Okay, so let's say I want
to. Quick question.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question? Okay, so
Yes.
George asked. I know you can't see it because you have your screen up. But he asked, "Is this a paid Chartable account he's using to track all of this? Can you use a prefix in the free Chartable account?"
Okay.
Do you know that?
Yes. There's a lot of confusion, and frankly, the Chartable folks are really smart, really amazing, but they're all engineers, and they've created a lot of confusion by they keep changing their pricing and models. I can tell you that yes, you can use the free Chartable to put a prefix on, and it will run even if you go over the number of impressions they allow, the number of downloads. It's totally cool. There's a limit to how many smart links you can create. So I think you can create 5. I don't remember what the number is. You can check, but you can only have so many smart links. The good news is you can put your own code on a smart link. It's called an SID. Ping me if you're interested. I can tell you how to do that. But basically, you can use the free account to get started with smart links. You cannot use the free account to do a smart promo. So what I'm going to show now, you would pay for. It's not that expensive. In some campaigns running right now, I might be spending a couple $1,000s in promo, and I'm going to spend under $100 on my Chartable costs. Significantly under that. It's not that expensive. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, and then rolling back to Jen Ward said that your Facebook example was awful,
free,
and so very Facebook.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, I get really angry when I see so many creators that are so excited about the results they've gotten on social, and they're putting everything into it, because I've yet to see one of those people who's actually measuring listeners generated. And when I work with some of those people to put listener tracking in, the results are horrifying what they're paying. I'll talk about it a little later. Social media is one of the best ways to promote your show for free and one of the worst ways to promote paid. I don't spend anything on social anymore for promotion. I found getting people who are using their app, getting them in that to then switch and listen to something isn't going to happen. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah. Okay, so let me talk to you about, these are great. Interrupt me if there's more. Let me talk about smart promos. Smart promos are the coolest thing, but these are not available in the free product. Okay, let's say I want Civilized on the right here is my show. I want to promote Civilized on Down. Lovely show from Definitely Human. I represent them. So let's say I want them to do a promo spot. Just read an endorsement in their show of my show Civilized. So I want to measure, though, how many people come from Down over to Civilized and try it as a result of hearing this promo spot in Down. That's it, just hearing it. So first thing I need to do is both shows need to be set up with the same measurement platform, Chartable or PodSites or whatever it is, which is why it's important that Chartable does allow that free. Anyone can join and use it. So in this case, both shows have Chartable, let's say. And so then I will set up a Chartable smart promo, basically, and I tell Chartable the spot on Down is going to drop on February 3rd, and it's running for 2 weeks. And I don't have to do anything with Civilized. Civilized has been tagged by Chartable already as a prefix. Okay, so here's what happens. It's February 3rd. Let's say Mike downloads an episode of Down, and he hears the post-read promo of Civilized. So it's just the producers of Down talking about how they love Civilized and giving the URL or whatever. So Chartable is sniffing, again, remember that IP and device type of anyone who hears every episode. So it now knows all of the devices that have downloaded or requested that episode. And it knows all of the devices that have requested it during the window that that ad is running. Now what it needs to do is look at who new, not pre-existing, who for the first time starts listening. So it's always looking at who are the new listeners of Civilized this week, today. And then it then checks within that to say, how many of those heard the spot over from down. So similar to a smart link, but there's no link here. It's just looking at the two data sets. And doing some much more advanced math than that. The guys are very smart. All the people are very smart at both companies. It's not just guys. So then Chartable identifies a match and reports a download as a result of the promotion, right? Because now it's found somebody new that had never listened to Civilized but heard the ad. And you can also look at things like how many times they heard an ad before they came over. So that's basically smart promos, how it works. The reports are similar. If there's any questions, but it's probably the most powerful tool I use because I'll talk about in a minute. And you probably already know the three things I recommend are promo swaps or promo spots, episode drops, paid or swap, and collaborative. And I can measure all three of those with a smart promo or a pod sites implementation.
Very cool. Very cool.
There are two ways to enable tracking, and this gets a little confusing. So one way is that you put the prefix on your show or on the show you're running the promotion on, or both, and that's shown here. But the other way is to use what's called pixel insertion. It's actually not a pixel. Pixel insertion is the name that comes from the digital world, where you would throw a pixel onto a website for an ad. Very common. What really happens here is the host is just reporting back, right? So Art19 will just give for every download, will just pass the IP and device type back to Chartable. If you're on Art19, Megaphone, Triton, AdsWiz, and a couple others, you don't have to add the prefix. You can just turn this on with a pixel insertion when you're going to run the promo. With Smart Promo, both shows need it running. So that makes pixel insertion a little harder. Okay, there's probably questions, but I'll keep. Okay. This is an article put up by I guess he's technically my boss at Pacific Content. Lovely, really smart gentleman, Dan Meisner. Love everything he writes. It's how we first met, because we both write about this kind of stuff, and I just adore everything he writes. So he has a great article. So here's why I recommend those three things and the order I recommend them. This is from Dave Zorab, who's basically the co-founder of Chartable. So on a promo, so that's where our host read promo. So I talked about a promo spot. You're going to get anywhere from 0.25 to 1% transference of audience. So if Mike's show has 10,000 listeners, at best I'm going to get 100 listeners from that smart promo I've negotiated with Mike. Okay. But if we do an episode drop swap, Mike drops an episode of my show and I drop an episode of Mike's show, or I pay for an episode drop on Mike's show of 10,000 listeners, I can get up to 1,000 listeners transferred from his show to mine. Now, they don't transfer, right? It's no zero-sum game. I just call it listener transfer because I'm going to gain 1,000 listeners. Mike's not going to lose any, right? So the difference there is massive, which is why episode drops are one of the most powerful tools, but they're hard to negotiate because some people get a little queasy, like their feed, they get all like, I don't know, they get very precious about their feed. I don't think they understand their relationship with the listener, or maybe they do and they know something I don't. So the only thing that I have seen that beats an episode drop, well, there's two, but the one I'm going to talk about right now, the only thing I really have that beats an episode drop is a collaborative episode. They can actually go even further. But we don't have as much data on those. They're a lot harder to do. Take a lot more time to negotiate a collaborative episode. So I tend to start with episode drops. I then tend to go to host-read promos if I can get them, paid or swap. And then I go to in-app promotion. So in-app promotion can be a very effective way if you're going to spend money, and I would certainly spend money there before I'm going to spend money on social. So some of the buy-in amounts are a bit high, right? It can be a couple $1,000s. A few of them you can enter like around $3.99 USD, but they can give you, the sales teams can also give you examples of the kinds of cost per download you're going to see, because they're able to track. The advantage of an in-app promotion, and app, by the way, hopefully you all know, is like Pocket Cast, Castro, any of the big podcast apps, not Apple or Google Podcasts, but any of the big third-party podcast apps, more and more now offer the ability for you to promote your show. They can actually tell you how many subscribers you get. As much measurement as I now have on episode drops and host-read promo spots, we don't really get how many subscribers we have. Some hosts will sort of guesstimate what your subscriber number is, but it's really made up. It's really hard for us to know, right? Because all the host gets is a download request. So the apps, however, know when someone in the app clicks that subscribe button. So it's nice because if you do an in-app promotion, you can actually sort of you can, on some of them in advance, understand how much you might be paying per subscriber, which is really helpful. Okay. Oh, I said CPLs. So CPDs, cost per downloads. What are some, it's an old presentation. So what are examples of what you might pay? Good rule of thumb is if you're going to pay for a host read promo spot, a good cost per download is $3 to $5. I have achieved lower than 3, but it's hard. Episode drops, similar, but you can often get lower price on the CPD on an episode drop for over a host read. But episode drops can sometimes, if you're paying for them, have a big premium on them. So it sort of balances out. In-app promotions, you can sometimes, most of them end up in the $6 to $9 cost per download range, and social media is just awful. You'll see here why. It's really hard to get under $12 CPD on a social media.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't actually have a question. I have a lot of questions, but George has a question. George Coster says, is there a list of the top 10 apps you'd recommend for this?
I don't even think there are 10 that have paid promotion, George.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I like Castro. I like Pocket Casts. Yeah, there's a few. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones just off the top of my head. There aren't that many. If you look at the actual larger podcast apps out there, Stitcher's really expensive, and they've re-released Stitcher and broken one of the only ad spots they could sell recently, so that's off the table right now. I don't recommend Player FM, but Overcast, I buy Overcast, I buy Castro, I buy Pocket Casts. Those are all great. I'm toying with Spotify, but what I don't like about Spotify has a new thing where you can buy an ad, there's an interface, you can do it all yourself, but it's the wrong creative. It's totally wrong. It will not perform. Basically, you record the audio and then it plays on the shows. Or last I checked, you could only choose what genre of music. I want to pick what kind of podcast I want this to play on, but I don't want to record the promotion for my podcast. Right? What we want is an endorsement. I want Mike in Mike's voice to read the endorsement of my show. So you can't really buy that on Spotify. Hopefully that answers your question a bit.
Yep. Very cool.
Okay, so getting the lowest, I didn't update the slide. CPD is dependent on fit with audience, quality of the endorsement. So I just talked about it. Getting an endorsement read is so important, right? The more honest and passionate that person is about your show. So it's really picking shows where you're like, it's a bigger show, but I think they're going to really like our show, right? Maybe you've met at a conference and you want to buy a spot on their show. but that quality of that endorsement is really important. And then show graphics can be important, but that's only for in-app. So when you're doing an in-app promotion, a lot of them will allow you to deliver new graphics. Like they'll want a graphic of a certain, like, I think they want it generally more landscapey, a lot of them. You have a chance to create a graphic. Don't just throw up your show logo. You think about what we know from digital marketing, right? A face always works better than no face, things like that. Really do some research into what works for promotion graphic, and then make the best, most compelling graphic image you can. Okay, what to not do. I've sort of talked about it. So I think it was Jen, I forget who it was, that was like, oh, social. I actually at one point spent a chunk of money trying to see what it would cost to get a cost per download on social media. And this is back when I was using listener and cost per listener. So I optimized these campaigns. I did multiple rounds. I worked with people that were good in different ones of these. I tried search because I have a background in doing some search, paid search. I tried Twitter. I tried Facebook. I tried LinkedIn. And just so you can sort of see, my cost per download got down to $7 on search, but as high as, it actually went higher than shown here. I think it went almost over $25 in one case. Which means I was paying $25,000 to get 1,000 listeners. Or my best case here, I'm paying $7,000 to get 1,000 listeners. And if you think about monetizing your podcast, right? Like an amazing CPM rate that you're going to get, which is cost per thousand, if you were to sell an ad, would be $50. Like I sell some splash stuff right now that's at the $50 level. So we get $50 for 1,000 downloads. And if I have to pay $7,000 to get those 1,000 downloads, it's going to take a long time to make that work, right? That return on investment. Those people have to become lifetime subscribers of my show until they die, right? So I tend to avoid social. No, I'm just drawing things. There we go. I made it. Oh, sorry. It's so hard not being able to see everyone. Happy to answer questions or dig into anything. I will stop sharing.
Yeah.
So I can come back. There you are, Mike.
Yeah, that was great. I have a hard time following a lot of it because I'm slow. But besides that, it's really cool.
You're not slow. It's a lot of information.
Yeah, I wondered, I just jotted down a bunch of questions, but do other people have questions? Because I'll just start firing away because I had a bunch of them. All right, until someone comes in, I'll do a couple. How the Glow FM thing with the referrals? Have you done any of that?
Yeah, I'm running Civilized. So you can go to civilizedpod.com/share if you want to see it. You're welcome. Thank you, Of Thy Lawyer. I forget your name. Lewis. Thank you, Lewis.
Yeah. George
he wants my last slide.
Oh, you can see that. I don't have to read it.
I will just. I don't have it posted yet, but I will post my here. I'll put it in the chat. Oh, I can't. Can I put it in the chat?
I can send him everything too, George.
Yeah. So fableandfolly.com, there's a page called resources. I will post a link to this there. I haven't done that yet. I was just in a mad scramble before this just to update a couple slides. Clearly missed a couple. So yeah, if you go to fableandfolly.com/resources, or I'll have Michael send it out. So we are running the referral program right now with Glow.fm in beta for Civilized. And it's actually been really effective. One of the Amira, who I guess one of the founders of Glow.fm, reached out because she was wondering how we were getting the results in of the number of people participating. Mm-hmm. And I realized that we use Aweber for our email, and one of the things I've automated a lot of things. And one of the things I did was anyone who becomes a patron or joins our newsletter, there's a bit of an automation that happens just to welcome them. And a couple days after the last thing goes out, I was sending out letting them know about this referral program. And that has proven to be a very effective way to turn someone that would be a sort of passive email subscriber into an active sharing the word and the gospel about a show they love. So when I look at cost per subscriber now, I don't know anything that can beat a potential referral program if it's running well. So there needs to be a reward we're giving out in referral programs. So in my case, I'm giving out 3 stickers. If you hit, I don't know, 3 referrals, I forget what it is. So my cost is about $2. And so I'm basically getting a referral that someone's clicked on to listen to my show. So I'm getting a really low CPD, but I think I'm getting a higher % of subscriber out of this too, right? When someone actively promotes a show to me and sends me the link so I can listen, making it easy, I'm far more likely to listen, and I'm also far more likely, because they know me, to like that show. But I'm still trying to play around with the pricing and the tiers and the measurement on it. But yeah.
Yeah, that and like the Patreon stuff is pretty fascinating. How you can.
I think it was Morning Brew, which recently got acquired. Right, Morning Brew is a podcast and a newsletter, and I think Amira from Gloat FM, I hope she said this publicly, said that they saw in, I think it was in one of the inside newsletters, basically a write-up of the explosive growth of Morning Brew. I hope I'm getting the show right, but they basically equate it to their growth almost entirely to their referral program.
Wow.
So the idea that as podcasters we don't have referral programs as a general rule of thumb is a bit of a gap in the space for those of us that are focused to want to grow, which I think is most of us.
And then how about an email newsletter? I know you said that most podcasts don't have them. What are some ways? How is that beneficial? I mean, obviously the referral program would go nicely with it, probably. But yeah.
I'm working on a 4-part series right now on how we use email at Fable and Folly. I got the first part done, so that'll be coming out soon. Because we get a lot of questions on email, and I wanted to share why I don't use Patreon anymore for communication, etc. So yeah, I think it's easy to forget how the lack of channels we have to reach our listeners and get them to take action, right? So we as podcasters have one of the most intimate forms of media available. There is next to no other media that gets invited into the personal, private spaces that we do, right? With our listeners one-on-one, our voice in their ears. So we have this powerful thing that's our feed, and we know that we can put out something in our feed, reach people in a way that's really powerful. But trying to get those people to take action, like support a sponsor, click a link, is hard. Because they're in their private space, they're washing their dishes, they're laying in bed, going to sleep with Drew. They're disconnected from, they're out running. So when most podcasters don't realize they have a problem until they go to launch their first Kickstarter or fundraiser and it doesn't go well, and they realize all they can do is keep repeating stuff on social that nobody's seeing. So there's a moment that comes where you're like, oh, I need a way to talk to these people, to hear from them. So what I love about a newsletter is people can hit reply. I tell everyone, I even ask questions and I'm like, just hit reply, you'll reach me. It is it can be a very powerful mechanism to stay connected. And most fans are going through stages of a relationship, right? Crowdfunding like Patreon or whatever is basically fans paying for access. Like they want to support a creator, but they also want to be closer. They want to feel more connected, right? And I think we have this intimacy in our medium that we then have to figure out what are the stepping stones towards things like Patreon. And I think email is a great one. And it allows us to then do things like a referral program and ask for money and promoting Patreon and just keeping our fans engaged.
Yeah.
Um,
And how do you get people to sign up for it? I mean, what are the ways you're using to get people to do that?
I use everything under the sun.
Do you?
Like I use my Patreon to feed my newsletter. I use my referral program to feed my newsletter. My website has pop-ups and offers you things. Like we created an interactive backstory for Civilized that was insane undertaking that just you can play via email if you sign up for the newsletter. Like
Wow.
um we do social promotions around our newsletter. We're but at the same time, I want it to be I don't want it to be a bogus list. I want it to be a very intimate list. So I don't buy lists. I want it to be the most connected. Um, some questions here.
Yeah, there are a bunch, and you can see them all, right? So I don't have
I
to.
can see them. Yeah, setting aside buying. Okay, is there best practices for a referral program? There is not. It's one of the things that Amira was talking with me about wanting to create, and I think so. Glow.fm is running a beta right now. It's it's beautifully priced. Like it's it's like I forget what I'm paying. I don't know if that pricing is going to change, but I think $20 or $25 a month for right now. We'll see how it rolls out. But I think Amira is actually putting together best practices around this referral program. Like, how many tiers should you have? What do you put in tiers? We learned some things around making first tier very easy to achieve. Like, I had to come up with a price point I was trying to give away that would make sense at 3 listeners referred, like actively referred, because we had it too high when we started. There's more coming. So I would say check out glow.fm, their blog. They're writing about it and they're sharing that. Um,
I want to try and get her on here.
oh, yeah, I can connect you. She's
That'd be great.
amazing. Set aside buying ads within the app. Which app offers the best user experience for listening? That's a touchy subject, Douglas. There are like you're gonna start a war. Um, I I I I've destroyed my subscribe list so many times by changing. Right, we've all done that.
Yeah.
Um, I was a Pocket Cast guy, and then I started to really not like the fact that I can't create named lists anymore. It makes no sense. And so I switched over to Castro for a while. Um, but then I really liked that. Then I switched back. I don't remember why, but I have like 18 on here. Some like Podyssey allow fans to like things and talk to you. Like I don't know. I think everybody has their favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I use Overcast. I don't know why.
And yeah, an Overcast for the insanos like that. Like, oh my, I remember when I had Overcast on my computer and all the RSS settings, and like it was like the most intense configurable. And that's why I went to podcast. It was simple. It was just little pictures of shows. I just click on them and they play. I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Spiraling me. News notes strike me as really odd unless you have a larger network. I disagree. 100% disagree. I forget the name for Barley and me.
That's Ben.
Ben. Yeah, I completely disagree. I have some shows that are just launching that just set up their first email newsletter, and they're not even live yet. So I have a show, The Wanderer, not even live yet, and they're already getting subscribers. I and I think that will be a very small niche show. If you are taking the time to put your voice into the ether every week or 2 weeks to reach whatever number of listeners that you're motivated to keep doing this, why would you not want another way to reach those people? Even if it's 20.
Yeah.
For 20 or 100 people, it's free. You don't even have to pay. MailChimp or Aweber, I think they're both free up to 400 and some odd users.
Yeah.
Like, why would you not want a way to reach those people on other ways they can connect to you or support you? Yeah, I find it's one of the first things when I bring a show on board that we're focused on growth. It's one of the first things we do is get that set up because they're all missing opportunities to be more connected to their listeners.
Yeah, I think even the smaller ones are more effective, right? Because you can really.
Yeah.
I mean, who was somebody I saw speak somewhere was talking about that with like he had a show and he had a network of shows, but the one with the least amount of it was so targeted. He'd made the most money off of that small show. It had a small audience because they were totally into it. So
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Yeah, I have a show that it's yeah, like I have shows of every size, and the mid tier and smaller shows often benefit more, I think, from the newsletter because I think when you hit a certain scale, it's hard to keep the intimacy.
Yeah.
Um, and I think one of the most beautiful things when you're smaller and growing is to keep that intimacy as long as you can. Um, yeah,
How many shows do you have in your in Fable and Folly in
I'm
your
afraid to
network?
count. Um, I'm afraid to count it right now. I was like trying to do this very stage thing where I did like one round, bring on some shows, and then just literally, I don't know what happened. I just had this crisis of just saying yes to too many people. So we're going through a bit of a growth spurt right now and bringing on new shows, which is a little overwhelming. Um, so last we were at 18, but we're higher now. So we haven't we're announcing on Monday three larger shows that are coming on. We
Nice.
most recently brought on Unwell, which was a very large show. Um, but we're launching some amazing new shows as well, which are smaller. I'm really excited about the first like audio fiction, historical fiction from a black perspective. That's a western, and it's beautiful, and it's the courtship of Moname, and it's just amazing.
Wow.
That's really gonna be fun. Uh, have you thought about integrating the Substack movement into this? Um, no. It's an interesting question, and it's also interesting the idea of pay to play in a newsletter. Um, I think it's just an interesting point. I think there are shows that could launch a pay to play newsletter that would benefit from them adding in the podcast. Um, my perspective is always we have the podcast now. What are our other channels to communicate and connect with our listeners? I think when you get into a Substack or paid method, I think the opportunity is sell them podcasts because that has proven very effective. Look at Morning Brew, right? Uh, so I think both of their products are free, but their podcasts and their newsletter. Wait, they recently I forget how much ridiculous money they just got acquired for, um,
Hmm.
but yeah,
Interesting. And we kind of went over the Clubhouse thing, but that's kind of interesting to. It's new, but have you used Clubhouse at all?
I've not used Clubhouse.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been in there a little bit, but it is anyway. Just it could be a way that you could connect with
Yep,
your because you have
hundred
control of
percent.
bringing people off the stage and stuff. So that it
Yep,
is interesting.
100%.
Um,
I think anything you can do to connect with your listeners and have real conversations with them. Uh, like I said, anytime I have a deep conversation, a real conversation with some, even one listener, but other people are liking it and whatever, it always results in someone joining. They'll either join the newsletter or one of them will become a patron. That
huh,
idea of really having vulnerability and talking, really connecting with people, pays off. It takes a
yeah,
lot of effort, but it's worth remembering to do.
right. Good advice. Um,
Yeah, what to put in your newsletter is hard. You know, I have okay. So here's the funny thing. So our biggest show that we create three shows on the ourselves in Under Fable and Folly, and those are Alba Salix, Civilized, and The End of Time and Other Bothers. Alba Salix is our flagship, big, started in 2011. It's a fairy tale. It is a
really fun.
fantasy. Yeah,
Really
thank you.
fun.
But it's like Shrek meets House. It's a fairy tale witch trying to keep. It's ludicrous, cartoonish, over the top, whatever. Um, and yet, for me, it was to realize that the connection point we had with our fans in our Discord, our close one-on-ones, our biggest Patreon supporters, was around the fear of creating. The issues of how do you create in a world that's on fire, all that stuff. It was about the artist's way. It was like if you had told me that I would be putting out content that was around sense of self and Buddhism and whatever, like for a show that's just this ridiculous family, like I would have said these things don't belong together. But um, in our case, they did, right? Like because this was something I was passionate about as a creator, and it turned out that that was a connection point with so many of our fans. and I think it's why we have the retention we do on our Patreon. So I think it's about really thinking about where you can be vulnerable that makes sense with you and your podcast. There is no more fanatical group of people in the world than beer drinkers. I know, because once a year till COVID, damn it, I and a brewer that's a friend who owns a brewery, and I travel across the U.S., a different area of the U.S., to literally go from brew pub to brew, like just beer brewer to beer brewer to beer brewer. And the community is amazing, right? It's this like hippie, awesome science meets hippiedom meets surferdom, very strange community, right? Where we're in the back of these giant. Anyway, so there's definitely a connection point. It's just figuring out what it is.
Yeah. I met Ben at a brewery, actually. We had a
Oh,
podcast up in Sacramento.
love breweries.
Yeah, me too. Haven't been to one in a long time.
I know, me either. It's so funny, right? Because there's all these rules about breweries, but there's something about that community where, I mean, we would travel and I bring my big dog, and we would just be in the back, like with all the brewers sitting around, my dog there, and we're all drinking. And at one point an inspector came in, and I was like, "Oh, I gotta get my dog out of here." And the inspector was like, "Nah, sit down." And we all started drinking. Like, it's just a very interesting community, the beer
Yeah,
community.
it is great. I bring my dogs to the ones here in Oakland. I was in this before, and my daughter, was at the time like 2, so I would just let her crawl around on the floor, and I would just drink beer with my friends.
Yeah,
'Cause I'm a
good
good
parenting.
dad. Just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding. All right. So, what are some other ways to use the smart links? Like, so that fascinates me, the whole smart link thing. Like, because that is actually for my clients, they're all associations, membership based things, and it's like I see that I have to start using those for them to get that, so they can see where their links are, if they're bringing anybody in.
I think if you are anytime you're posting a link to your podcast somewhere, you should be thinking, why aren't I smart linking this? Because the question is, do I want to know if this link is worth even putting here, right? Like, am I going to get any downloads from doing this?
And the smart link is going into Chartable or Podsites, but Chartable, and then your hosting program knows it's there, or
so basically, in Chartable, you would create a smart link and then you would share it. I mean, there's a limit on the free account how many smart links you can get, but I think it's 5, whatever it is. But you would basically,
that's already going into your RSS because they're through the hosting.
Correct. So
okay.
You can put the prefix. Most hosts some will let you put the prefix on and just type it in. Most you have to send to support, I want this prefix enabled. Like, I think one of my shows, I have 3 prefix right now. It's insane, right? We have Podtrack, Podsites, and Chartable. But so you need to have the prefix on for Chartable, have that added, and then all you have to do is create a smart link to try and say, I'm going to promote this episode, or I'm going to promote my show in Twitter. Is this worth doing every Sunday or every PodFam day? Does anybody, like, there's a lot of services like Podkite that will let you track clicks, and even if they then click to go to Apple or whatever, but they won't tell you if someone hit play when they get there. And that's the thing for me. I want to know how many people tasted my episode, because that's what we're about, everyone. Like,
and
we need people to sample. We just need people to sample our show, right? If they don't sample, there's no potential to turn them into a listener. So for me, SmartLink, if I'm posting a link somewhere, will actually give me a sense of how many samples am I getting out of this. And if I'm not getting any, why am I wasting my time posting this link every time I put on an episode here? I can save some time, or I can really invest into this platform, Twitter or whatever, to say, what do I need to do in here to get enough people engaged? So one of our shows was nobody was sampling. So we did a contest on Twitter. I think it broke the rules. I don't think you're allowed to do it, but we just did it, right? We just did a contest with a link, and more people sampled than anything we tried. But it's like, so you can either use it to be like, oh, it's not working, I'm going to keep working on it. Or you can be like, some of us, I know some people who every time they publish an episode, they got to upload it to YouTube, pull out the tweet, create the video, right, with whatever tool, and then you got doing all this stuff. And it's like, well, but if nobody samples it, like, maybe you can get some time back.
That's interesting. It's so interesting. All right. Well, I want to respect your time, the people of here, because it is one here. Oh wait, there's one more question from a shit disturber.
Douglas, you are really pushing. Um, uh,
Oh,
what would I
yeah.
say that? I've tried a lot of hosts. I recently had to go through a big search for a host where I needed DAI capabilities that I could use at a network level of shows. So that really became very, very specific. Um, the host with the absolute worst interface in the world is Libsyn. It's atrociously awful, but they have some of the most lenient pricing and solid delivery. So I still have a couple shows on Libsyn. Um, I think when it comes to what's the host I love? It's out of BC. Oh, son of a bitch. Simple. Is it Simplecast? Hold on.
Simplecast.
Yeah, Simplecast. So, you know, one of the hosts that I think is very beautiful and gorgeous and has some really neat features that are hard to replicate everywhere is Simplecast. I'm very interested to see what happens
And they got
now
bought.
that they've been acquired.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's hard, and there's a lot of free hosts out there too. Right, growing number of free hosts. I've used Red Circle; it was fine, it worked. Um, yeah, and there's some others.
All right. And then, okay. Well, thank you. George had some nice things to say about me, which is always good.
Thanks, George.
And you. Anyway, Sean, thank you so much. Always
You're
great to hear
welcome.
from you. Great stuff. Next time we're going to have somebody else. Molly Ruland, do you know her?
I don't know where Molly Rowan from.
She's from a company. I can't remember the name of her company, but she does podcasting, obviously. But she's doing Every Woman Should Start a Media Company. And I actually saw this presentation before and I
Oh
thought it
yeah,
was fantastic. Yeah. Yeah.
I saw a thread on it on Twitter. It looked really good.
Yeah. It was very interesting. So I'm looking forward to that. But thank you so much again, Sean. You're always great
You're
to have
welcome.
on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I hope to someday see you in person.
That would be great. Well, my sister is in your neighbor. Like she lives probably very close to you, so someday it'll happen, and we can never travel again.
She's in Berkeley?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Well, when you come out, you're welcome to come on
Thank you.
over.
That
All
would be
right.
great.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks, guys.
everyone.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.
Hey.
All right. Oh, he ran away. Bye bye, guys.